Good morning. My name is Pablo Willie Bustos, and I use he and him pronouns, and I'm joined today by the choir up in the choir loft. Let's start today with song to help us arrive in our bodies. Please rise in body and spirit and join me in singing the opening hymn, which will be Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing. Come thou fount of every blessing, tune our hearts to sing thy grace. Streams of mercy never ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life perfection fills our hearts with joy and love, teach us ever to be faithful, may we still thy goodness prove. Come thou fount of every vision, lift our eyes to what may come. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in thy home. Hear the cries of war fall silent, feel our love glow like a love. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come thou fount of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom in desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With thine aid, O fount of justice, earth be fair as heaven above.
Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church of Rochester. I'm the Reverend Shari Halliday-Quan. I use them and they and she and her pronouns. And it is my pleasure to serve as the lead minister here, along with Reverend AJ. And leading worship, we have Pablo and the choir, and we have Chris as our worship associate. But of course, it takes all of you. Church and what we do on Sunday mornings is the work of the people, but church, what it means to be a congregation, a community together, that's not something that just happens in this hour, here in this room and online. It's something we live and breathe and do throughout the week. It is our mission to, through spiritual connection in community, we listen deeply to others and ourselves, we open to wonder and transformation, and we serve together with love and humility. We gather on Sunday mornings here on the ancestral and contemporary land of the Seneca people, the keepers of the Western Door. And if you're new or newish here to this congregation, I invite you to stop by our welcome desk outside or let us know in the chat online so we can help you get connected. And if you're new or newish here, or you've been coming here for a couple of years or a couple of decades or half a century, let us help you get connected also. Join us after worship for our connection. And one of those offerings, you've got lots of choices online and in person, but one of those ways to gather in small groups and get to know each other better is to grab a cup of coffee, which our coffee team graciously puts a sign over there to get right to the point. The caffeine is that way. Grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatnot, and then sit with a small group and connect in conversation. We have a few prompts that follow the sermon, and we invite you to get to know each other more deeply, to listen deeply. It's only the first step, the first move in a journey of spiritual companionship to one another. As I said, when we gather on Sunday mornings, it takes all of us. And so we're going to light our chalice, the central symbol of our faith, something that connects us with other Unitarian Universalist congregations. And if you're online, I invite you to light a candle or a chalice at home. And here in the sanctuary, Kyle Williams, who's a member of our Building for Our Future team, and you'll hear a little bit more about that team's work later in the service. He's going to light our chalice here. Please join me in our unison words. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and mysteries of this great gift.
Good morning. My name is Chris Dorso. I use he and him pronouns, and I'm going to take you in the Wayback Machine to March 7th, 2018. I remember the date distinctly because it was the day before my birthday, the day before I was supposed to get a call with a job offer about a new job, and the day before we were supposed to set a closing date for the sale of our house on Long Island, which is an important plot point that will come back later. We don't get a whole lot of snow on Long Island, by the way, which is also a plot point that will come back later. But that winter was a massive change for me and my wife and our family. My wife had gotten a job offer up here at the University of Rochester. We decided to move, sell our house, leave my job at 14 years where I had permanent appointment, and really kind of start over up here in Rochester. And Emily and the kids had already moved up here, actually. I was in the house by myself with a mattress on the floor, a pile of clothes, because all the furniture was gone, my guitar and a laptop, that was it. And so, March 7th, we had a big, heavy Western New York style snowstorm. And it was in the evening, and I was I'd probably either on my laptop or playing my guitar, because as I said, that's all I had. And all of a sudden I heard this massive boom, and I thought, oh, cool, thunder snow. That's fantastic. And then I thought, no, you know what? It sounded different than thunder snow. So I went out onto our front porch, and I noticed that the tree that our neighbor had, and I could see my neighbor's house, and not the tree that used to be right there. And so I went around the side of the porch, and I found that my neighbor's tree had fallen, destroyed our fence, and punched a hole right in the side of our house. And you'd think I'm going to get to the that's why we go to church part. But no, we're not there yet. So the next morning, this was late, it was like 9 p.m. I said, nothing I can do about this now, deal with it in the morning, call the insurance company, get all set, whatever, fine, okay. Waiting for the insurance folks to come up, doorbell rings. Wow. That was fast. So I walk over to the door, open the door, there's a guy standing there. I said, hi, I'm all excited. And the guy says, hi, my name is Paul. My wife and I are buying your house. And that is the time when I've never needed church more than that moment right there. Because with all the change that was happening, you can plan for change, and you can expect change, and you can adapt to change. But even when change is happening, you can never quite plan everything. And I was insightfully told him, we got you some firewood. And long story short, it all worked out and everything was wonderful and it was great. And we got insurance to take care of everything and it was great. But know that when we are here, we work together to plan and to be adaptive and to live in the moment and be ready for change when it happens. And to know that as a community, we rely on each other and we look to help build that community where when change happens, we can lean on each other to make that a lot easier. So with that, I would like you, and this is a complete non sequitur, and I apologize, but it came up on social media and I love it. I want you to take a moment to get to know the folks around you and take a moment to introduce yourselves and ask your neighbor, and I posted this on Facebook this morning and I'm eager to see all of the responses. You're being sold as an action figure. What accessory are you being sold with? Discuss.
right, you beautiful people. It is such a joy to hear you all. I have never been more excited to be in this room of superheroes. You all are absolute delights. I can't wait to hear what accessories you will bring to your next super life. Save some of it for after the service and connecting.
Dear Reverend Pickett, in the rush of events surrounding Selma and our Alabama voting project, I neglected to express my deep gratitude for your sponsorship of the dinner honoring me on January 26th. Please accept this belated note of appreciation. I must confess that few events have warmed my heart as did this occasion. It was a testimonial not only to me, but to the greatness of the city of Atlanta, the South, the nation, and its ability to rise above the conflict of former generations and really experience that beloved community where all differences are reconciled and all hearts in harmony with the principles of our great democracy and the tenets of our Judeo-Christian heritage. Sincerely yours, Martin.
I invite you now to a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer, beginning with silence shared within this sanctuary and beyond. I invite you now into your own breath. Great mystery which grounds us and surrounds us. Divine presence known by many names and in many ways. Eternal fount of blessing and renewal. Let us be nourished by your holy waters this morning as we remember the life and legacy of a great ancestor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and consider what this day, what his legacy, what the movement for justice today asks of each of us at this time we find ourselves in history. Knowing there are always many more questions than answers, and with so much pain and wrong in the world, so many trials and obstacles in our own lives to contend with, sometimes the weight of despair, we must admit, is greater than hope. It can be too much to bear alone. And so we come seeking connection, seeking the sustenance found in community, seeking a relationship with something larger than ourselves, seeking the balm of renewal deep within us, seeking the voice of comfort that says, "This too shall pass. Peace shall have victory. The oppressors shall be undone." Each of us hears or receives this voice differently, and sometimes it is only a faint whisper, and other times it may thunder all around us. But however and whenever received, may it bring us relief, renewal, courage, and direction, instruction. For we know that it is not justice alone which bends the arc of history, but our own blood, sweat, and tears, our own individual and collaborative efforts. Whatever our role in the revolution, our own voice shouting justice will prevail, and knowing it to be true because we know that we will be part of making it happen with every action we take in the name of love. And as our church and our corner of the world here moves into the frozen season, as the daylight steadily grows and glows, and yet clouds linger and snow blankets branch and ground, and we anticipate the bitter cold of winter still to unfold. May we say an enthusiastic yes to the opportunity that snow and ice can bring, with their gifts of silence and stillness. May we find the opportunity to reflect, to name and listen to the grief lodged in our hearts, to name and offer thanks for the beauty and good in our life, to name and to nurture the growing edges within us. May we turn ever towards renewal and allow ourselves also to be a vessel for that ever-flowing fountain of possibility, to bring such blessing to all who we encounter, reminding them and ourselves of the larger love which holds us all, always. Blessed be, and amen. We enter now into ritual to bring what is on our hearts and lay it on the altar of community and spirit. Honoring the complexities of life, I invite you to bring to mind whatever grief, gratitude, or growth is alive within you, carried with you in your heart, or heavy on your mind. Online, I invite you to share into the chat, and here in the sanctuary, you're invited forward to light a candle at one of the altars. If you would like an usher to bring a candle to you, please raise your hand. May we now share in this ritual of community care and witness to one another's hearts. All that we hold in our hearts for ourselves, for each other, and for the world is held in this community and by a love that will not let us go. Amen, and blessed be.
Dear Reverend Eugene Pickett, thank you for your letter of October 24th, informing me of the contributions which you have received for the purpose of establishing a memorial to my husband. I am enclosing letters to the individuals you listed, and I would greatly appreciate if you would forward those to them. Please convey to the members of your congregation my deepest appreciation for their help at the time of my husband's death. Their concern and sympathy were demonstrated in many ways and made a tragic and confused period less trying for my family and me. It would have been impossible to provide for the many visitors in my home without the generosity of the members of the Atlanta Unitarian Church. The food, transportation, lodging which they provided will be remembered as a tangible demonstration of the brotherhood in action which the Unitarian Church has always stressed. Opening, sorting, and handling the tremendous amount of mail sent to my children and me would have truly been an insurmountable task without the help of the people who responded to the Unitarian Church's appeal. Through the years, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Atlanta has been a leader in bridging the gap between the white and black communities. My family and I will always remember how warmly and willingly you extended friendship and love during our most difficult hour. Please know that we will always be grateful. Sincerely yours, Coretta Scott King.
Everything that our church does for ourselves and for others is made possible by what we bring to it. Each week, we practice shared generosity to support the work and witness of Unitarian Universalism here in Rochester, and half of our Sunday offering goes to a partner organization working to create a more just and loving world. Today, we share our plate with the Crisis Nursery of Greater Rochester. The only program of its kind in New York State, the Crisis Nursery delivers emergency care to babies and children during family crises, while addressing poverty by preparing young women and caregivers for employment. In addition to child care at no cost, families and caregivers have access to a resource navigator, providing referrals to community resources that can deliver permanent assistance. The Crisis Nursery cares for more than 2,000 babies and children annually. In the spirit of abundance and generosity, our offering will now be received with gratitude, both here in the collection boxes, in the sanctuary, and online or by Venmo.
What a mystery, a QR code. Well, as the two videos demonstrated our readings today, it's never too late for a thank you note. Now, Dr. King and Coretta Scott King were in undescribably busy seasons of their life when they wrote to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Atlanta at those moments, but they were months late, and forgiven, of course, they were. So I sent a few thank you letters this weekend that were 4 years past due. And if you're waiting for one from me and don't get one in the next week, let me know. Forgive me. These letters from the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King were perhaps not the letters you were expecting. Perhaps you were expecting, and I'll admit, it was a surprise to me, who has made a spiritual practice of reading letter from a Birmingham jail each and every Martin Luther King weekend, that would not be the letter we'd be talking about today. We wouldn't be talking about the letter from 1963 in which Dr. King criticizes white moderates for asking for a more convenient season for change. We wouldn't be talking about this incredible text that includes gems like injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, that includes such gems as being woven into a network of mutuality. No, it's these two modest but important thank you notes from Dr. King, and then later his wife Coretta after his assassination, to our siblings in Atlanta. One wonders, what of this congregation in Atlanta that they had such personal relationships with the King family? What of this Unitarian Universalist congregation, predominantly white folks in the city of Atlanta, who in a period of a few short years go from a more formal Reverend Eugene Pickett to Gene? How did this family get to know them? It might surprise you to learn that this congregation in Atlanta, well, they weren't the bastion of justice, an unflinching, unfailing congregation of do-gooders that we might imagine them to be. You might be forgiven in thinking that when Mrs. King writes about the Atlanta congregation standing in the gap between the Black and white communities in Atlanta for years, that she meant a very long time, decades or maybe centuries. But in fact, she meant years. More than you can count on your fingers, but fewer than you can count on your fingers and toes. Not 25 years prior to when that letter was written, the American Unitarian Association, this was before Unitarianism and Universalism merged, the American Unitarian Association wrote to our congregation, our siblings in Atlanta, and admonished them for refusing to racially integrate. A few years later, when the congregation refused the membership of a high-profile Black member of the Atlanta congregation, the minister of that church resigned in protest. Unitarian Universalist ministers organized a boycott of the congregation, saying we would not serve this congregation, would not serve these people who were making this particular choice. And the congregation did what many Unitarian Universalist congregations do and said, screw you, and hired a Disciples of Christ minister. In one of the boldest exercises of power that I know of in our history and in our inter-movement struggles, the American Unitarian Association found that unlike most of our congregations, well, it was the National Association and not the congregation itself that owned the building. Don't worry, that's not the case here. But the worry is appropriate because given this really clear stance against racial integration and the sense that that was in violation of what it meant to be a Unitarian, in 1951, they sold the building and the congregation closed. Now, of course, a congregation is a people with a purpose and not a building. And so the church still existed, but they could no longer gather as they once did. And well, suddenly the American Unitarian Association had a heck of a lot of money and no church in Atlanta. So a couple years later, they planted a new one, started another congregation. This isn't a study in contrasts, but in wholeness. Just as the letters from Dr. King and Mrs. King contrast with the letter from a Birmingham jail, this is a story of wholeness, of integrity, of change. Now, this new church plant in Atlanta, of course, it attracted people by intention who were new to Unitarianism, new to progressive liberal faith in Atlanta, new to a non-creedal, non-specific in our spiritual sources or theology, but specific and boundary in the world that we wish to create together, attracted new people. And the congregation wasn't the same as the congregation that existed before, but many of those people who had been in the congregation before, well, they rejoined. They joined the new church. It was a mix of new and old. And after a few years, the church adopted the name of the old church in a symbolic gesture towards reconciliation, but with clarity that this new church would be racially integrated. Within a few years, just a couple, not decades or centuries, this church that had formerly refused to racially integrate was hosting racially integrated youth group meetings that brought together not only that congregation, but the youth group of Ebenezer Baptist Church, the church that Dr. King led. And the youth group was led by Coretta Scott King. When news got out of this racially integrated youth group, I offer another story about this Atlanta congregation, which at the moment isn't looking too hot, I recognize. When news got out of their racially integrated youth group and the hosting that they were doing, threats began to emerge. The Ku Klux Klan threatened to shut down the meetings. And in meetings with Mrs. King and the leadership of the Unitarian congregation, it was decided that, well, people could keep their children at home if they wished, but the meetings would continue. No parents chose to keep their children at home. And part of what made that possible was that parents and other members of the congregation decided not only to send their children at night to church, but to come themselves, not to join the meeting, but to stand outside, forming a circle of protection around the building, facing outward, but with their backs creating a protective barrier for their loved ones, for their beloveds. The boundaries as we head into our season of frozenness and boundaries were clear. We would overcome the boundaries between the white and Black communities in Atlanta in this small way, the journey not done, but this next step clear, and the boundary between safety and harm would be formed by the people of that congregation. Now, I have no doubt in this congregation that should a threat like this emerge, many of you would answer a call to link arms or stand shoulder to protect our children, to protect the ability for racially integrated community to happen. And yet here in 2022, we live and work and worship in a greater Rochester area that is de facto segregated. that a legacy of redlining and racially bound covenants create one of the top 5 most segregated communities in this country. What it means to create spaces of safety and possibility will require bold answering to a call for difference. Now, I want to be clear that people who may or may not have been Klan members did show up to those youth group meetings for the months after these parents started forming this ring, but nothing really happened. There were cars that would drive by, a few shouted insults, but nothing particularly exciting. The bold answering of a call, the clear creation of a boundary, well, it was mundane, ordinary, a little bit boring. There was nothing to do when you showed up but to talk to those in the circle with you. And so I invite you into this stance again, this outward-facing stance that places us shoulder to shoulder, knowing that, well, safety and our physical well-being may be at stake, but most of the time, the worst part about it is having to talk to someone you don't yet know. I invite you into this stance knowing that many of you would answer yes to a call if you knew that our children were physically harmed, and yet still in this mundane and ordinary and everyday boring way, our children suffer from de facto racially segregated communities here in the greater Rochester area, our children and ourselves. So I would expect that you would say yes to coming here to the church or another church to protect a youth group meeting. But what of school board meetings now persistently, annoyingly, and aggressively under attack through coordinated anti-trans, anti-gay, and anti-racial and ethnic education? What of housing segregation that continues not because of being inscribed in the law, but because of contemporary lending practices that still make home ownership more difficult for Black and brown people here in Rochester? What of a school teacher tased to death in Los Angeles? Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice here in our home communities. It is a threat to our ability to create the beloved community. Here in Rochester, here in this version of Unitarian Universalism, we have had bold vision, ways of answering the call, stirrings within our soul to create a more racially integrated world. After the assassination of Dr. King, when the congregation in Atlanta was sorting through the mail and making casseroles and giving rides, this congregation was moved to take action somehow, some way, moved to do something out of a sense that, well, shouldn't we? And an idea emerged, and for years, this congregation worked to build racially integrated housing right here on our campus. David Schwartz was president of this congregation at the time, and in negotiations or barriers placed by our greater community, that dream never came to fruition. I hold this up not as a failure, but of a struggle a challenge, a time when we tried to do something bold and it did not happen. And perhaps that is because the idea truly emerged, yes, out of a need, out of a long-standing legacy of housing segregation that was obvious at the time and still is, but also out of a sense of guilt and urgency and, quite frankly, lack of partnership that might have made it politically possible. We do not know all the ways logs might crash into our house. We do not know all the ways that change might set upon us. But as we set our sight on a vision of a world that is ever becoming, that we have a hand in shaping, how might we face outward? How might we claim a vision bolder and of a better world? Kyle Williams lit our chalice earlier, and he is one of 6 members of our Building for Our Future team. A couple of years ago, we needed to make some repairs to our impressive, architecturally significant, and yet sometimes challenging spiritual, physical home. And in that process, we set in place a process to begin to imagine what our congregation might look like in the future. How might we apply our mission to our physical plant, to our programming, to our dreams yet to come? The Building for Our Future team includes Kyle Williams and EJ Santos, Barbara DeLeo, Mallory Szymanski, Carol Gill, and Paul Swain. And these 6 people are charged with sorting through how we understand our mission to be alive in the world, how we understand and I'll adapt Mrs. King's language here to say our siblinghood in action, how we understand ourselves to live our values. This team has been working to generate ideas and understand our community partnerships, so the next time we undertake something big and bold, we might do so knowing that it is woven into community partnerships and our sense of ourselves so that we might actually get it done. But we'd also like your ideas. And so that mysterious QR code, I'm gonna ask to pull up again. And if you've got a smartphone, I invite you to either type in this URL or use the QR code. And I'm gonna ask you 3 questions. I say I, but it's really our Building for Our Future team, as they start to imagine what might be possible if we were to live our mission here in this physical space, here in this physical place. In the greater Rochester area, what impact might Unitarian Universalism have? I'm going to give you a minute to fill it out right now. And you might look at this and say, Shari, these are some very big questions. How can we possibly answer them in a minute? Or also, I don't have a cell phone. I live in peace. I invite you to fill this out quickly with your gut. Whatever ideas you have that spring to mind, put them in. You can fill out the survey again tomorrow if you have a better idea. And if you don't have a cell phone or you don't want to bother with this, the Building for Our Future team will be outside. Stop by their table, talk with them. Take a minute. All right. I know some of you, despite my, oh, looks like the QR code isn't working for everyone, but some of you filled it out. So the Building for Our Future team will be busy in the lobby, is what I gather. We've got a little bit of time. We're about to sing our closing hymn today. And it's something that's become a bit of a tradition for this congregation. On Martin Luther King weekend, we close often with Dr. King's favorite hymn, Precious Lord, Take My Hand. It has embedded a theology that not all of us hold, not all of us would use this language, and yet many of us find comfort and strength and nourishment in this hymn. I invite you to lean into it, trying on the words, even if they don't fit you perfectly, knowing that they bring strength to someone here in this room, someone here in this congregation, knowing that the changes that come to us, the work ahead for us, is not always predictable, that we'll be asked to adapt, but that if we can stand shoulder to shoulder, if we can face outward, and if we can find strength in each other's comfort, we might be better able to face this world, better able to shape the world as we dream it to be. May it be so. Come, rise in body or in spirit. Let us sing with voices strong. Here in our spiritual home, may we be guided by our collective wisdom and that which we do not yet know, that which we cannot control, but we can adapt to, dance with, and celebrate this world with. Go out into the world nourished by stories of what we once were and what we might become. Go knowing that who you are now is not who you always were, nor is it who you will always be. Go, ever changing, ever loving. Amen. Oh, you're all looking at me because I forgot to extinguish the chalice. You're so good. If we ever needed an object lesson and then it takes a team, here we are. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May it be so. Bless you all.